Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining Ranger 4's webcast, The Phoenix Project Game. Here to facilitate the discussion this afternoon is Ranger 4's Helen Beale, Jean Kim, who, as you may know, is co-author of the book The Phoenix Project, and Jan Schilt from GamingWorks. As mentioned earlier, please write any questions you may have in the chat box or use the question function in your GoToWebinar control panel, and they'll be answered at the end. I will now pass it over to Helen.
Thank you, Priyanka, and good morning, good afternoon to everybody on the call. Really busy call today, so it's lovely to have you all here. And I know we've got people from all over the world, including from Melbourne in Australia, so it's very exciting. As Priyanka said, my name is Helen Beale. I'm a DevOpsologist here at Ranger 4, and we are DevOps transformation specialists. We're really delighted to have a man who needs very little introduction on the call today. But Jean, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Helen. Great to be here. Was one of the three co-authors of the Phoenix Project, and also a big fan of the Apollo 13 simulation that was done, that has trained a generation of service managers in the ITIL community. So great to be here with you and Jan Schilt.
Jan?
Yes, Jan Schilt, as Jean said, we are the founders of GamingWorks and also the designer of many games, and especially Apollo 13. And I'm the designer of the Phoenix Project business simulation based on the book from Jean and his team.
And it's great to have you here too, Jan. Thank you very much for joining. So, Jean, do you want to start by telling us a bit about the background of the Phoenix Project, where the book came from, where the ideas came from, how it's been received in the market, and how you think it may have changed perhaps the way some people think?
Yes, absolutely. This book was really inspired by the book that influenced my professional career the most, and that's a book called The Goal by Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt. And that was a novel about a plant manager who had to fix his cost and due date issues in 90 days, otherwise they would shut the plant down. And so that book has been integrated into almost every mainstream MBA curriculum, and Dr. Goldratt wrote extensively over the decades about how many people wrote him, describing how when people read the book, many people in the manufacturing field said, holy cow, it's like you've been hiding in our plant. And that was really our design goals behind the Phoenix Project, is really capture what we show in the next slide is this downward spiral that happens in almost every technology organization, independent of company size, independent of the industry vertical we are competing in, whether it's even profit or not for profit, left unchecked, without something like DevOps would lead to just horrendous negative outcomes, whether we're in dev, test, operations, or even in information security, but even more importantly, would harm the organizations that we serve. One of the things that we did after the Phoenix Project came out was extensive benchmarking. I worked with a gentleman named Jez Humble and Puppet Labs, and in the last 4 years, we've benchmarked 25,000 plus IT professionals, really with the goal of understanding what does high performance look like. And we now know decisively that high performers exist that are using DevOps principles and practices that are massively outperforming their non-high performing peers. So I just want to briefly go through what those metrics are, share what some of those technical practices and cultural norms are, and then hand it over back to you, Helen, and Jan, to show how this has been embodied in the Phoenix Project game. So briefly, we know that high performers are more agile. They're doing 30 times more frequent deployments. So that could be a code deployment or a deployment of something in the environment. And more importantly, they can complete it 200 times more quickly than their peers. How quickly can we go from a change committed into version control through the deployment cycle, through the testing cycle, so successfully running in production? Furthermore, we know that not only are they getting more work done, but they're getting far better outcomes. So when they do a production deployment, they're 60 times more likely to succeed without causing a service impairment, a service outage, a 7-1 outage, a security breach, or compliance failure. And when something bad does happen, which Murphy's Law almost guarantees, we know that high performers can fix issues 168 times more quickly. In other words, the mean time to restore service is 168 times faster. And what's even more exciting is what we found in the in 2015, 2014, I guess, was that not only do high performers have better IT performance, but they also have better organizational performance. They're twice as likely to exceed profitability, market share, and productivity goals. And for those nearly 1,000 organizations that gave us a stock ticker symbol, we know that they had 50% higher market cap growth over 3 years. So I'm just so excited that what this finding showed us was that this is not just about the performance of the IT organization, but is every organization becomes more reliant on the IT function, it really does affect business performance as well. And I think this is just demonstrated brilliantly in the Phoenix Project game that was designed by GameWorks. The last slide I have, Helen, is really about the 3 ways. We use this in the Phoenix Project as the underpinning principles from which we can derive all of the DevOps patterns from that we observe in high performers that allow them to do tens, hundreds, even thousands of deployments per day while preserving world-class reliability, security, and stability while achieving business goals. And so the first way is all about that flow from left to right in the value stream, from dev through test, through operations, into information security and ops, and by no means should that be sequential. And so here we talk about those technical practices like the continuous delivery pipeline, the Kanban boards, limiting work in process, and so forth. The second way is all about the reciprocal flow of feedback from ops to dev. In other words, whenever something goes wrong, how do we make sure that everyone in the value stream, especially those at the very earliest, can get feedback on their work and get that feedback as quickly as possible so that we can prevent bad things from happening again. And if we can't prevent, at least enable quicker detection and recovery. And the third way is all about creating this culture of continual experimentation and learning, creating those high-trust cultural norms that allow us to do things like have the Netflix chaos monkeys. We're going to inject faults into the production environment because these are all mechanisms to accelerate learning. So those were that's the origin of the Phoenix Project, the value of the practices that are described in it, as well as some of the technical practices, cultural norms, and even the architectural practices as well.
Those are some stunning numbers, aren't they? And we teach the 3 ways as part of the DevOps Foundation course that we do, and yeah, there's everyone we're working with is trying to get to those kind of speeds and that performance, that business performance. What's really interesting, I think, I love using this Dilbert cartoon. I use it a lot in presentations at the moment. It's just because there is a lot of sense that underpins DevOps, and there's a lot of proof out there that it does make a difference, but it has become one of these buzzwords that kind of people think is a bit of a silver bullet. It just makes me giggle, this little Dilbert cartoon. He's always so flippant, isn't he? But we also use this graph a lot, which is a Google Trends graph, which shows you kind of how the term has taken off. And feedback I often get is we've been doing DevOps for years, we just haven't had this name for it. I mean, why do you think this term has got so much currency behind it? Gene, do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I'd like to think that it's because wherever we sit in the value stream, whether we're dev, test, operations, information security, we know that kind of overly functional orientation, sourcing to external partners, splitting out the work between dev, test, and ops, and having this ticketing culture doesn't help achieve goals. And now that developers can be made so productive with things like cloud and continuous delivery, more than ever, operations can't afford to be in the way. And I think this is just put us in the perfect storm of places where the inadequacies of the way that we've done work over the last 20 years have become more evident than ever. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I think so too. I often talk about kind of 3 forces that come into play as well, kind of the digitization that creates that conflict that you've just described, and the velocity that's needed and the friction that's holding that velocity back. And then I talk about my harmonious polygamous marriage between Agile and ITSM and Lean, and how those 3 methodologies or movements are kind of converging and evolving together, and almost as a result we've got DevOps. And then there's the advent of a load of tooling and automation capability that we haven't really seen the likes of before, which enables these groups of people to collaborate and work together more effectively. Jan, do you have anything to add to anything of that?
Well, from my experience, what I observe is that many of our Apollo partners and companies are always in this IT service management area. And what we discover is that they are a little bit under pressure now by the dev teams. Like a story from a few weeks ago, I got a manager on the phone. He said, my boss is forcing me to use Kanban boards, and I don't see the need for my incident management process, because the time I need to take a post-it, write down the incident, and have a stand-up meeting is the time I need to fix it. So I think there's another wave coming up that IT service management teams are a little bit worried about the change in how dev works, and they try to adopt this way of working. They grab Lean, they grab Agile, but some of them, they don't have a clue how to integrate this. And I think this is also one of the reasons we discover more interest from IT service management groups who also ask for information about how can we train our people in DevOps, but they are not developers.
And this is probably a great time to introduce the game. So we've been lucky enough at Range 4 to be involved in the development as Jan has developed the game. But how was it for you, the experience of taking this almost legendary book now and making it into a game and translating it into a game? How was that?
Well, the first thing you have to know, we're always looking for exciting context. So we believe that if you want to get people into the learning modes, you have to put them into a challenging, realistic environment. And they can, well, like at Apollo, we put them in a mission control center. In Challenge of Egypt, we let them build pyramids out of Lego and apply Prince 2 or PMI or whatever. And when people are in the excited environment, they start to act normally. So they don't act, they don't play, but you will see the real behavior, and that's the only way to get people conscious about lack of competences or conscious about the success of certain competences. So I think that Paul Wilkinson, my buddy, he spoke to Gene a few years ago, and they were exploring a little bit about the DevOps book and how to use it. And then it was quiet for a quite long time because we were busy. Gene was busy, of course, as everybody. And then in December last year, I read the book again, and I thought, wow, this is a great environment because more and more people are reading the book. They all want to be Bill, or they all want brands, or they recognize those people in their own company. So this could be a great context to put people in. And to be honest, I started on the kitchen table to prepare the first cards, and then I contacted Gene's team and I said, what do you think about this idea to use your book and your context as a serious business simulation? And I think from the first moment on, everybody was excited, and like a real DevOps process, I started to build first test packages and little cards, the characters. I designed the scenario. I read a book several times to make sure that I have the right atmosphere, the right chaos, the right emails, the right behaviors that will go wrong, but also the right didactical structure that people can learn, that applying the DevOps principles will really bring the value, as Gene said in his nice presentation about faster this, better this, and so on. The only thing that was not really clear, of course, is what are the real Phoenix projects, because we talk about a package of lots of activities they need to do in order to make the company successful again. So I use my imagination, and I put about 27 small projects into the game just to put the people in the same context as Bill, that suddenly had more than 450 post-its on the wall, and he was really frustrated, and that will happen in the game as well. I like to make people a little bit frustrated, because then they want to learn how to finish the day successfully.
So I was just going to let's talk about the experience of the game a little bit. So it's been launched for a couple of months now. There's been a huge amount of interest, and people really want to understand how it kind of works. So yeah. We've been lucky enough, obviously, to do test runs and early runs with yourself. So when people walk into the room, what's the immediate thing that happens? What's the initial experience that they have?
Okay, so the first thing what happened is that they get used to the fact that they just started something they don't know anything about, which is similar to when a company shouts, we're going to start doing DevOps. Then everything is unclear. So the first 20 minutes, everybody's looking around. Where am I? What I'm going to do? What do I do with all these cards? And that has a purpose, because we want to make people aware that before you start your journey, there needs to be a few rules in place. Like, do I know my role? Do I know the target of our team? Do I know the team members? Do I know the language? So we put people in this very uncertain environment. And then we will start with a package of projects, very basic, and they will learn the rules of the game. And the first round is quite simple, so everybody leans back and they say, oh, well, I think I understand DevOps, it's clear. But there is no visualization, no flow. They miss a few activities, so the customer is complaining, a lot of rework, and that's the moment where the facilitator starts to teach them a little bit about DevOps, about the flows, about visualization. Not too much, only the what. And the how is something they need to explore themselves. So what you see in practice is that the first thing they have to do is, well, visualize. So put the post-its on the wall. Then they discover a first flow. So we don't tell them anything about the 3 ways. We just let them go, and then we make them aware after round 2, for example, that what they were doing was focus on visualization and flow first. So without teaching them, they will discover themselves that this is a quite natural development of the team. Now then we start up to build the pressure, and then people get a little bit frustrated because they say, oh, too many cards, and you have to slow down. And I said, wait a minute, to who do you talk? Because they talk to me as a trainer. I said, don't look at me, look at your business. Because there are 3 people in the room playing the retail director, HR, and a financial officer. And I said, go to them and tell them that you have too many work to do. And then the business starts to play very nice. They say, yeah, because we run a company. We want to go back to 330,000 sales, and our share price must go up. So yes, we have a lot of projects, and you better go back to your IT department and fix it as quick as possible, which is a kind of recognizable environment because all the participants, they recognize this type of customers. So we're not scared to make people frustrated, but we help them out of this frustration by adding the DevOps principles and teach them how to apply them.
What I love so much about that context is that almost every practitioner in an enterprise IT environment will, I think, recognize that. And what I love about the slide that is shown right now is that these are actually so many of the artifacts that we created while we were building the Phoenix project to create the business scenario. So the idea that the business corrective action when we're losing market share and we're falling behind on our commitments to customers is that we put more work in process. I mean, I think that is something that is the business survival instinct, and I think the setup for that scenario is just fantastic.
Yes, and then people realize that the enormous workload in round 2 can only be handled if they minimize the work in progress, if they create flow, integrated testing. We introduce a kind of fast deployment tool, not really in terms of a computer program, but just a little tool. And then we make them proud because we ask them about metrics. We say, okay, this morning, how many deployments did you do in your 25 minutes? And they say, oh, 2. Right. How many did you do in round 2? And they said, oh, 4. And how many did you do in round 3? And they said, wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4, 16. I said, look what you did. You increased your deployment rate. And look at the customer. They smile. Look at the graphs, they go up. And then we bring them back to reality and say, now, you see the success. Now, tell me, what did you do in order to make this successful? Because we have to make them conscious about the things they were using, and that the things they were using, that was a DevOps basics. The basics are in DevOps. And then they are very happy, and we say, now, put everything together we're going to play the last round. And then we have a nice feature. The business make up their mind. They thought a project was be very successful, and then retail says, yeah, we made up our mind. We want a digital or a website where people can design their own car using our car parts. And then IT get frustrated, said, no, you want deployment program for your employees. Yeah, but we are the business. We can make much more money with this project. And then IT learns that if you're not agile, then you cannot follow the customer. Some teams get frustrated. Some teams, they start smiling, say, come on, come up with your project, because we know how the flow goes. We know how to avoid mistakes, and that they be successful. So some of the teams will not finish with the right result. They maybe lost business, but still they go home with a long list of experiences.
That was something I was
Particularly.
asked the other day, was whether you can actually fail in the game. And there is you do score each round, don't you, against the stats at the start that we're looking for.
I think it's crucial that if you run a workshop like this, the didactical system in the game and the way you facilitate should be in such a way that people that really apply the success factors of DevOps, they should be successful. If not, if they don't have flow, if they don't have feedback, if they shout at each other, if they finger point to each other, if it's still them and us, if it's a lack of communication with business and internally, then they don't need to have a good result, because it will be the wrong message. People will go home and say, you guys make chaos because it will work. So we are very conscious that we need to teach our trainers not to be scared if a team fails, as long as you know that the reason is the fact that they're not applying DevOps principles.
John, just one observation. I mean, I think what made the Apollo 13 simulation so successful was that it was not that didactic training style of watching someone present PowerPoints for a day, but instead it was the experiential learning, putting ourselves in a situation of having to handle urgent issues. So I love that experiential style being brought to bear on the work that we do, especially for work that spans so many different disciplines. When you talk about dev, test, operations, infosec, the product owner, the business owner. So I've been dying to ask. So I've had the privilege of watching some of the videos of the trials that you've done. What has been your biggest surprise? Maybe your 2-3 biggest surprises as you've deployed the game and gotten feedback from these pilots and real life simulations?
Well, the first one, which was really astonishing, is that people who said, we are going to do DevOps, they were not able to facilitate stand-up meetings. They lack communication. They didn't create flow. There was no leader in the team that stood up and say, let's organize the work a bit. So I was really worried. So I told them, if you really want to start with DevOps, my suggestion is not to start with the DevOps foundation, but first learn to collaborate and get some practical skills in working as a team. So that's one thing, that people think that DevOps is like an ITIL framework. You just buy it, implement it, and then it's a magic stick. So people really need to understand it's a whole change in the way of working. So that's one. The other thing is that a lot of teams, they forget about the feedback loops back to the business. So in the game, for example, we have 3 business team members, and in round 1 and 2, I play CEO, and I go to them and said, so tell me, what is the status of the Phoenix project? And they look at me and said, we didn't hear anything from IT yet. So somehow we think that DevOps is only Dev and Ops. But some people say, wait a minute, we need to add biz, because they should be part of the chain. They should be part of the flow. They should also be part of decision making. It's very strange, but you may expect that they will extend the flow into the business as well. And the last thing is that, but that's more the effects of simulation. In IT service management, it's quite usual to start with an ITIL foundation for the whole team. And the feedback we got from many people now, they said, maybe it's better to start with this interactive workshop with stakeholders from the whole team, so we can make them aware that DevOps is not just theory, it's a whole culture change from all stakeholders. So some of them, like last week in Gdansk, they went back to the office and said, I'm going to tell my boss we should first put all the people in a room for one day so we can really explore the consequences of using the word DevOps, and then start a training program like coaching and training and so on.
That's great. Maybe one last thing. I think these simulations are just so valuable. One of my favorite ones, besides the Apollo 13 that I was exposed to over a decade ago, was a story called it was an agile simulation where one person would play the product owner, another person would play dev, test, and so forth. And in the majority of the simulations, most of them were not even able, and the program that needed to be written was to alphabetize a list. And in most simulations, they were not able to successfully ship one single feature. So I think that the learning objective is to help elevate the difficulties when we don't do certain things. I think there's no better way than through simulations.
Yeah, you're right.
And I think that the point that this slide's trying to make has just come out very much in the discussion you guys have just been having. I mean, we see this all the time. Everyone has heard the term CAMS or CALMS as an acronym to describe what DevOps is about. But the amount of people that we go and see that have tried to do DevOps, and what they've done is build a little bit of a continuous delivery pipeline. All their papers are all about automation. And so many people are realizing that they need to go right back to the start and think about how their organization is set up and how they behave. And this game, for me, is really about human behaviours and learning how to talk to each other and how to, as you say, ask the right questions at the right time.
Yeah. Yes, and I think that's something that people cannot learn from a foundation, with all respect. You need to have the theory and to speak the language, but I think the biggest challenge is to change the culture, and many people said so. So that's what we try to do in the game, at least start this process.
And it's really hard to change. So I love this little cartoon, because if you ask people who wants to change, they all say yay. But if you ask them who actually individually wants to change, you get a different answer. And we work a lot with change agents who are going to be, I think, probably the majority of the people that are trying to come on the kind of public courses that we get, and then trying to implement the courses or the training, the game in their own organisations. So these people quite brave and fearless. And in fact, Jean, you've got an event coming up at the end of the month, the DevOps Enterprise Summit, and I think a lot of the theme of that event is around change leadership in DevOps and how people are putting themselves in personal jeopardy by standing up and saying things ought to change. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your plans for that event?
Yeah, in fact, Helen, if you go to, I think, slide 19, I have some information on the DevOps Enterprise Summit. This is a program that we've been doing we're going to our third year in the United States, and if you click one more ahead, we are doing it for the first time in London in 2.5 weeks. So on 30 June, 1 July, we will be hosting the DevOps Enterprise Summit in London, and we have speakers from Pearson, the Walt Disney Company, Labara, LV, Hiscox, the News UK, HMRC, the UK HMRC will be presenting, Thomas Cook Group, Ticketmaster. So we have 27 speakers, and Helen,
including Ranger 4 and Lego.
Ranger 4 and Lego, right? And we'll also be having Jan and his team present on the Phoenix Project game as well. And what the majority of speakers really are in the form of experience reports, just as Helen said. These are the change transformation stories presented by the people leading those transformations, and describing. Everyone has a 30-minute fixed format. It's an experience report, so that means tell us about your organization. What was the business problem you're trying to solve? Where do you fit in the organization? Are you from dev, test, operations, infosec? Where did you start and why? What did you do? What were your outcomes? And most importantly, what did you learn? So that the rest of us can learn from those experiences. And I have found in the last couple of years, I never learned more than in those 3 days of the DevOps Enterprise Summit in the US, and I know from the quality of the presentations that are being given in the London conference that it's going to be exactly the same. So I look forward to seeing you all there, hopefully.
Yeah, me too. So yeah, these change agents that are pushing change are just so key to the DevOps movement. I love this quote from Einstein, because it really sums up that the realities that we live in, we've created ourselves as individual humans. We've kind of created these processes. So Jan, how does the game help thinking? How does it help these change leaders that are being so brave? How does it help them bring people on their journey?
Well, first of all, a lot of people they think what I said earlier, that DevOps is like ITIL, and I'm coming originally from the IT service management world, and everybody's a little bit scared about introducing new frameworks. So I think the first thing is that people understand when they start a journey is to continue where they were. So if you already have your ITIL process in place, perfect. What we try to demonstrate in the game is if there is an incident coming in, you don't need to have standard meetings and Kanban boards and all the stuff immediately in place. Simply follow the process, your own little flow from IT support to a solution, and give it back to the customer, because you still have your SLA, you still need to minimize downtime. So we try to start the journey in a kind of awareness program. So what is it? How can it help? What does it mean? And since the game is in 4 rounds, we can simply demonstrate in 4 rounds one day how you can move from the first way to the second to the third, and investigate what does this mean for my own organization in terms of support and training and coaching and maybe change in behavior. So I think that in this exercise people will get a very quick overview of the consequences. It's like a one-day brochure you buy or you get and see if this is something you want to have. And since we don't talk too much about DevOps in the game, but let people experience, we can simply focus on behaviors and interaction between people.
Well, I think you've touched on this a bit already, but a DevOps transformation is a long old journey for most people, with many different activities that need to go on to proliferate these thinking and behaviors across the many individuals that make up an organization. Where, in your opinion, does the game fit in that journey?
Well, first of all, I'm really interested in the next book from Jean, because I thought that you will announce this or bring it in the conference at the end of the month, because I think this handbook could really help people to start this journey. And maybe an idea could be to have a little subtract from the handbook as a kind of checklist in the game, so we can teach people to recognize the different steps before they start in real life. Because what I learned from many countries where I was, that it's not normal to experiment. For example, in Germany, experimenting is very risky. You could fail. So there are cultures in the world where we can easily say, yeah, you have to experiment. And say, no, we want to fix it 100%. When it's ready, we will send it to the customer. Now you can imagine that in those countries, it will be very hard to get this type of work up and running. We start with German partners now, and I'm very, very curious about the first trainer, how they will react on this, because the first time they hear about DevOps, they were a little bit scared. So I think this is also one of our tasks, is to make people a little bit more aware of how to start this transformation. And I think the handbook can help, the theory can help, games can help, coaching can help, and people should really take the first step and then have some guidance to move forward.
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point. I mean, I think there is a role for didactic learning, and I would put that, training is part of that. Books are a part of that. But I think the experiential learning, I think, is such an important part, especially when we're asking people to do work in a different way. And I think the goal of experiential learning is really to confirm that we understand what status quo looks like, and that we can actually give them low-risk ways to try doing work in a different way. I would say in some ways the Phoenix Project book is kind of experiential learning, right? Because it describes why, current problems, why it happens, and so forth. And the game is just another way, in a low-risk way, right, to be able to try these principles.
I think you're absolutely right. And I think something falls off.
Are you okay?
I'm okay, yeah. So one thing I want to say is that I now forgot. I forgot, sorry.
We were talking about experimental or experiential learning.
Yes. Yeah. And what I saw 2 weeks ago, I had a very experienced team in UK, and they are 7 years busy with this transformation. And in round 3, normally the game leader will facilitate the learning process and the improvement cycle. And I thought, these guys are so experienced. So I said to them, hello, welcome back after the break. I give you half an hour to improve your work. And I grabbed a cup of coffee and I sat in the room. And I was just watching what they were doing. And they simply took the action themselves and they start to improve. Now, other teams, like last week in Poland, I did exactly the same. And they all keep looking at me. So you can imagine that the game is also a perfect instrument to learn this cycle of continuous learning and say, now it's safe to experiment, because try to make this game better and better. Try to reach your goal today and then reuse this knowledge in your day-to-day work, because maybe the context is different, but the process is the same. And so this is, I think, for more prepared people and more mature teams, a great way to say after round 3 or 2, now you continue the rest of the day, and I will bring some cards if needed, and that could train people how to facilitate this learning process in their own organization.
And I really enjoy how the rounds of the game work. So you kind of build on and you build on. So you experience continuous improvement, you experience incremental change. And that's, again, a fundamental part of what DevOps is about. I use this quote from the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis, quite a lot, because it kind of explains that you need to take steps. You can't just suddenly switch everything on and it's all there. It's kind of, an evolutionary transformational change we're trying to help people through.
Yeah.
So, so kind of for the audience then, what to do now. So you've learned about the Phoenix Project game today. You know that it's based on the book that Jean co-authored. So hopefully many of you have read that and had that experience of living in the novel, and perhaps want to take that to some people to kind of live it in the game. As we've described it, is a card-based business simulation. It's for around 12 people. I think, Jan, you can play it with a few more. What's the minimum and maximum you would need?
I would not have too many people, because then you can see a typical culture that people show kind of what we call dive behavior. They just sit there and do nothing. So I think the best thing is to have groups of 10, 12 people. Then we have enough people to be very busy. Some people who can do testing and playing the business, and that's a good setting. More people, then, for example, we got a project in America right now with 6 teams, and they have a kind of internal competition because they keep the dashboards, and they are really trying to make more money and better market share price. So I got feedback from the trainers over there and said it's so nice to see how everybody wants to win these competitions. So that could be a nice idea, to have multiple teams in the same organization, and at the end you have a kind of winner who get a free copy of the book or whatever. So I would not make the groups too big. Just small groups so everybody can be active and can learn, and that works fine.
And it's one day long, isn't it? And ideally you need a place where people won't be interrupted by their kind of business as usual. We need to kind of get them into a space where they can really immerse themselves in the experience. Would you recommend that?
Yes and no, because yes, from the learning perspective, no, is the real world is different, because what we teach them in the game as well is that there are always disruptions. And the disruption can spoil the flow, can spoil your work, can lead to rework and mistakes. So even if somebody comes to the teacher and said, I need to go out for a 20 minutes call, I said, whatever you do, it's your day. Make sure everything is settled. Some of the people, they simply get out of the room, then the whole team is confused, so they lose a precious time. The teacher is very tough. Time is time. Stop, deploy. And then the customer is unhappy because they didn't deploy everything. So sometimes I like to have this kind of dynamics as well. So yes and no. Sometimes you get free opportunities to get people in the learning mode by their own behaviors they do every day.
Yeah, I can see how that happens. So everyone that's on the call right now will be getting an email following the call, and you'll have a button in that email where you can book your game with us. If you're happening to listen to a recording in the future, then you can also book your game by using the email address hello@range4.com. We've reached the end of the slides and the discussion, but we do have a number of questions that have come through, so I'm going to run through them for you guys. So the first one came from Sven. Are there some public events where I can experience the game? And Sven has also added that he believes in the power of gamification, and he's already a playing lean facilitator. So we actually have a public event in the UK in London next week. It is fully booked. We will be announcing another one in London following the success of the one next week. Jan, do you know of any other ones? Sven is actually in Belgium, so over your way.
So the first thing we have to understand is that gaming works with partners. So there are 2 ways of getting interest or getting familiar with the game. Is simply go to partners. So you can go to an average partner in Belgium and ask, do you have the DevOps game? If not, you can call Helen. If not, you can call GamingWorks, because we are organizing open trainer sessions right now, several places in the world. But the first step is to go to one of our partners and ask them to organize customer sessions, and that's the first step.
And we'd be happy to look at holding a public scheduled one in Belgium as well. No, it's really not very far away from us, so we'd have to do that.
Perfect.
And actually, Sven's next question you've kind of already answered. He's asked, is there a way to become a facilitator for the game? So I think you just talked about the open train the trainer sessions that you have.
Yeah. So we are organizing 2 days trainer sessions, a very intensive day. We just finished one yesterday evening, and we organize many more. So in different places in the world. So just contact us. We put you on the list, and we will be able to train you.
And Document from Melbourne has also asked how he can access the book. I will make sure there is a link to it in the follow-up email. You can get it direct from Gene's IT Revolution site. I'll try and check the Amazon.au, but the way that I understand books are published, I think you can probably get it either in a paperback or in an electronic version from Amazon in Australia as well. So we will make sure that comes over. And that's the end of the questions that I've got right now. So people on the line, if you've got any questions, now is the time to pop them in the chat box or the question box. And while I'm waiting to see if you do that, I may as well thank Gene and Jan very much for your time today. That was a really interesting chat. Hopefully everybody else enjoyed it as well.
Yeah, thanks for organizing.
And Jan, can you tell us about what you'll be doing at the DevOps Enterprise Summit in 3 weeks?
Yes, I will explain people how DevOps can fail, and I will tell some stories about the success factors and what will happen if you don't use them, and also make a link to the simulation, the effectiveness of simulations, and how simulations can help you to avoid the mistakes. So it's a little bit negative title, but sometimes it attracts people. But I always end it with the good news. So it's just to teach people how to avoid the biggest mistakes by using simulations.
And I may as well talk about what I'm going to talk about as well. So I'm going to be talking about correlations between DevOps and holacracy. So as you've seen from today, Ranger 4 are very interested in ways that support people that are wanting to change culture as part of what they're trying to do as a DevOps transformation. So holacracy has a huge like a synergy between its goals and DevOps goals, and offers us some really practical steps to help people make cultural change in the way that this game is a very practical step for people trying to tackle something that is actually kind of quite esoteric sometimes. I think it's quite difficult to pin down what culture really is, but it's helpful if we think of it as organizational structure and human behavior, and if we can tackle those two things, we can change culture. And I'll be joined in that talk by Soren Pedersen, who is one of our customers at Lego, who we've been working with for nearly a year now on a DevOps transformation. So we're going to talk about how holacratic approaches are helping him move the bar with what he's doing in Denmark at Lego. So I'm really excited to be doing that. So thanks for the opportunity, Gene.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the presentations, folks, and hoping to see you all in London.
We will
Great. One question. Has anyone attempted to play the game in a virtual classroom or given thought to how that could work? I know it's card-based.
Yeah, well, you know, if you do business with Gaming Works, then you have to realize that you have a very tough day sitting together with 12 people arguing. And so we believe that this kind of competences you can only learn by face-to-face interaction. So all our games are face-to-face, and if you want virtual training, that's okay. But then we don't develop this kind of interactions. It's only face-to-face with a good facilitator. And the same with the open classes. So we have experienced the last 15 years with open classes, and an open class with 12 people from 12 companies. You can imagine that nobody will show their real behavior. They will not discuss this, because why would you? So the real power of this kind of instruments is for those organizations who want to start a journey, like this company in the US. They said, we're going to do DevOps. They put 60 or 70 people in this training program. Everybody gets the same treatment. And after this, our partner will help them with coaching and take all the lessons learned from the game into day-to-day work and refer back to the game when they see difficulties in the day-to-day work. So that's our philosophy, and that's how we build our simulations.
And Erkman also wants to know if you're going to Melbourne anytime soon, Jean.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Gosh, Australia is one of my favorite countries. I would no plans this year, but hopefully next year.
Okay, and Erkman is also asking if we can organise training in Melbourne. I'm going to pick that up with you after the call. Erkman, we can either help you find a local partner or we could potentially get out there as well. Okay, so that is our webcast for today. So thank you very much, Jean, for your participation, and Jan, thank you very much also for your participation.
You too. Thank you very
Thank you
much,
so
and
much.
thanks for
See you
all
in
the
London.
listeners. See you in London. Yes.
See you soon. Thank you. Bye. Thanks
Bye-bye.
everyone for joining. Bye bye.